All right, guys, if you're watching this at home, you missed 5 minutes of the lecture, go ahead and pause it. Look at this. I absolutely want you to remember this, the split command. So I'll type this into our exam notes in just a minute. I absolutely want you to remember this, how to print something with a loop. I want you to know how to pull elements out of an array by their subscript. That's the most important part of that. All right, so going back to our notes. So use s.isDigit to check to see if it's all numbers. Use s.isAlpha to see if it's all letters. Use s.isAlnum if it's all numbers or letters. There's a couple more. s.isSpace. What that checks is to see if it's all so-called whitespace. And whitespace is either the space bar or the tab or the /n that you get from an enter key. I don't care if you remember that. Just kind of took it away. Yeah, there's a way to check to see if something is all spaces. We know how to split stuff now. Data is equal to s.split, and you put your delimiter between the parentheses. Delimiter is a comma, or data is equal to s.split, and if you wanted to break it up by spaces, delimiter is a space. So if we wanted to write some code that would open our file and print it out one per line, I'm just going to open up this may8.py file and print it out one per line. Or we could ask for the file name. That gets kind of tedious, right? But let's do that. Let's do it the right way. So we're going to ask the user for the file name, and then open that file for reading, and then print it out line by line. So let's do it. Wait, we haven't even asked them for the file name yet. File name is equal to input. Open what file? Question mark. Now we have to open the file for reading. If I wanted to do that, file is equal to what? How do I open a file? Not sure I heard it. Close. Open file name, comma, and then since it's for reading, put the R there. If you were going to open it for writing, you'd put a W there. And then for line in file, for every line in the file, a couple of things before we play with it. Well, and before we do that, just print the line out, and then we're going to close the file. File.close. So open what file? I'm just going to open the same file that I'm typing in. may8.py. And it ran. And if we look, it put a whole bunch of blank lines everywhere. Those are the /n's, the enter keys on the end. Because if you read from a file, it doesn't ignore the fact that it's gone to the next line. So we need to strip off that stuff at the end. When we do this, it'll also strip out spaces from the beginning, which is probably okay, but if you didn't want to do that, if you only wanted to strip the stuff on the right-hand side, you could use rstrip. If you only wanted to strip the spaces off from the left-hand side, you could use lstrip. But we're just going to strip both of them. So let's do that. line, whoops, above our print command, line is equal to line.strip. Remove leading and trailing white space. Including new lines, \n. That's the real reason we're doing it, so that when we run it, we don't wind up with all those. Now, what would be kind of maybe nice is if the line was empty, we might want to ignore it. We could put some code in there to ignore empty lines, if we so chose. Bless you. All right. It's opened my file. Notice that all the tabs at the beginning are gone because the strip command removed those as well. But we didn't say that we were creating a file editor. Here's what I would do if I wanted it to ignore empty lines. And we could also make it ignore lines that begin with a hash symbol. So let's check to see if the length of the line is 0. And if it is, let's just continue. Or if length of line greater than 0. Now let's do equals 0. And then we're going to issue the continue statement. And the reason I'm going to do that is I'm going to remind you what continue does. We've seen continue. What continue does is it causes it to immediately reiterate the for loop, whereas break would cause it to exit the for loop. Okay, so if it's an empty line, we'll just continue. We're not going to print it out. How about if it's got a hash symbol? If the line, and what position would the hash be in? Just like the first element of an array, it's the first position in the string. 0. Okay. Is equal to a shift 3, a £, colon. Then let's continue. Now when we run it, it's not going to print out anything that begins in a hash, and it's not going to print out any blank lines. All right. We're really not going to take this example much further. I do want to split the line of data up, but I'm going to use spaces as our delimiter. So data is equal to line.split, parentheses, quote, space. And then let's just print that out. Print the data out. And let's comment out the printing of the line. All right, so if you can tell what it did, it opened the file and it read it into a series of arrays, right? Starting from here, this is every piece of our file. Every word that was separated by spaces, but ignoring the lines that started with a hash. That doesn't mean we're ignoring every hash, because sometimes the comment was at the end of the file, right? I mean, end of the line. Okay, that's about enough. What did we see here that was of interest? That one. But you know how to do that. It's just the same as printing out array. Display the first element of string S. Print string subscript 0. Right. All right, what if we had this? I'm just going to put this up at the very top because I'm tired of answering that question about what file to open. Name is equal to Tony Stark. And I want to put into a new array just the word Tony in a new string. So using slices, put the first name into a new variable called fn. So fn is equal to name. Now where does Tony start? What position is that first name?
0, 1.
It's at 0. Yep, right there. It's at element 0. And then since we're doing slicing, we're going to use a colon. And how long is this string going to be? It's going to be 4. So 4 plus 0 is 4. Now do the same thing with the last name. Into variable ln. I'm going to use caps because ln looks like one n. Guess I'll modify that so that's caps too, first name. So last name is equal to name. What's the position where the last name starts? Yeah, sounds right. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And how long is this guy's last name? How many characters is it?
5.
5. So 5 plus 5 is 10. We could do shortcuts on both of these. And what do I mean by shortcuts? If you leave the number before the colon, it treats it as though it were 0. So we could just do this. Fn is equal to name, colon 4. Now, do I consider that a big advantage? Leaving that colon off? Yeah, I mean, leaving a 0 off? No, that wasn't much typing. But if you leave off the number after the colon, last name is equal to name 5 colon. It goes to the end of the line. And that is useful because you may not know what the end of the line is, right? I happen to know. You know, we counted it over. So this is called slicing. Use a colon in your subscript to specify a slice. Just string x colon y starts at x and goes up to, but not including, position y. Now this but not including business is just like that range, right? If I told you to do a range statement for x in range and I wanted you to count from 1 to 10, you'd really do that, right? Hope you know that. Count from 1 to 10. If you do it the way that I've been saying it, where you just add the length of it to the starting position, it works out fine. Otherwise, we would have had to say, okay, what is this ending position? This is ending position 0, 1, 2, 3. I go, okay, that's ending position 3, but I better make it 1 past 3. That's a 4, and that's why I put 4 there. Yeah, sure. Or you could just say this is 4 long, and it starts at 0, so 0 plus 4 is 4. All right. So my other comments. If I leave off the number before the colon, starts at 0. If I leave off the number after the colon, starts at x and goes to the end of the string. And we have done slicing, right? This is not our first introduction to it. Might be our second. Wave your hand if this is actually our first introduction to it. Only 2 people are saying that it is. Everybody else in agreement? Somebody tell me we did it.
I think we did, yes.
But we probably only done it one time. I don't feel real great about putting it on the exam if we've only been doing it one time. Well, I will reduce the number of questions about slicing, and we will put these in our notes. And if you have any questions over it during the exam, raise your hand and I'll come back there and help you with it. That seems like the fair solution to me. Reduce the questions about it, have the stuff in the notes. If you get stuck, raise your hand. Okay. I know when I start putting this S, comma, X colon Y stuff, it makes some people's eyes start rolling back up in your head. But you know what these are. These are just numbers. So if you wanted to, if you had this, print name starting at position 2, going out but not including position 6, what would that print? Well, which index is it going to start at? What letter is at position 2? Don't say O. Alright, this is index value 2. How do I know? 0, 1, 2. Okay, so whatever it's going to print is going to start with that N. And what's the difference between 6 and 2? 4. So it's going to get 4 characters. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's what it would print. It would print NY space S. Start at index 2 and go 6 minus 2 characters. You know, I haven't ever actually run this to make sure that there's no syntax errors in what all we typed. Okay. So I never printed out the first name. I never printed out the last name. So I'm not proving that it printed out Tony Stark. I'm sure it is, but we could add some print statements just to make absolutely sure. So maybe way down here right before our line command, let's print first name, comma, last name. Just to make sure. All right. Okay. So slicing. Use a colon in your index. Your subscript. S1 colon 5 would get the values starting at index what? And going up to but not including index 5. So if our string is this, Luke Skywalker, and we say print S subscript 5, 1 colon 5, we know what it's going to do. Where's position 1? It's the U. And it's going to go up to but not including 5. So I could count that out. 2, 3, 4. Or I could just say 5 minus 1 is 4, right? And so it's going to be 4 starting at that position. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's what it would print. Slicing works with strings, it works with arrays. Okay, so other stuff that I'm sure is going to be on the exam. If you have an array like this, what is the index value of 76? Easy stuff. 2, right? We've done for loops and while loops and stuff like that. Write a for loop that will print the numbers from 1 to 100. So what's our for loop going to look like? I don't even specify the variable. We could use I or whatever. For I, and since it's a range of values, that'd be how I would do it. In range, what's my first number going to be? What's my last number going to be? 101. And if I wanted to, I could say going up by ones. I could leave that off. All right, going back talking about functions. What if we had this? Define AA. And what AA did is print the words AA. And then we had define BB, which called AA, and then printed BB, and then called AA again. And then down here in our main code, we did print CC, and then we called BB. What is this going to print? If I ask you that, and then you have to take the time in to type those 12 lines of code in, it's going to put you behind. You ought to be able to eyeball it. What's the very first thing it's going to print? Well, what you do is you scroll past all the statements that are indented, and you find the first unindented line of code, which is that one, right? So it's going to print CC. It's done with that. Now what's going to happen? It calls BB. BB runs up here and calls AA. So what's going to happen? It's going to run up here. It's going to print AA. Then what is it going to print? It's going to do this because it returned from AA. It executed that. So it prints BB. Now it's done with that line. What's the next thing it's going to do? It's going to print out AA again. Do another example of that. Alright, so there's our code. We have 3 functions and then 3 calls to them. What is the very first thing it's going to print? You scroll down, you find the first unindented line of code. It's a call to function called X. So what does X do? Almost think I heard it, but I'm also deaf. It's going to print 1. And then what is it going to do? Yep, it calls Y, so it jumps up and prints 2. Alright, now we're done with that call. So what happens next? Prints a 2. There's nothing else to do, so now we're at this call. Print 3, right? Hope that makes sense. Hope we've done functions enough that you could do that. If I ask you to do something like this, write a function named molt. It has 2 parameters, X and Y. It multiplies X and Y and prints the result. How would we write that? Okay, well, how do we write a function? What's the first keyword we use? Def. Alright, and what did I say my function was going to be called? Molt. And how many parameters, and what are they? 2 parameters. Their values are X comma Y. And what's this function supposed to do? Multiply X by Y and print the result. You could do that all in 1 line. You could do it in 2 lines. You know, result is equal to X times Y. Print result. That would do it. Something like that. Write a function named SQ that has 1 parameter, X, and returns X times X. So do that over in your source code, just up at the very top of it. How would you do that? Give you a second. Alrighty. So what would my top line be? Def SQ parentheses X. And it needs to return X by X. I could do it in one command or two. If I was going to do it in one, it would just be return X times X. Or I could put it in a result variable and return the result. But that's good enough, right? Hope that makes sense. All right. Really, our exam is mostly going to be over arrays and loops. You know, we've covered some good stuff in files and stuff like that. And there will be questions in the exam drawn from all 7 mind taps. If you haven't done the mind taps, you better get them done right. So, study guide. Review the mind taps. Now, my goal is not to make this comprehensive, so I'm not going to be including questions from the mind taps for Unit 1. So, which one did Exam 1 cover? Heck if I know. My guess is it was over chapters 1 through 3. Sure would have been nice if I just said right there. Okay. Okay. Looks like I can state that with some fair certainty, that we didn't start Chapter 4 until after the exam. That appears to me to be the case. So in effect, the exam will be over 4, 5, 6, and 7. What was Chapter 4? Chapter 4 was yeah, you could tell me that. Chapter 4, making decisions, and, ors, and nots. We already know about these if statement kind of things. We can recognize a flow chart that's either an if or an if else. Is this an if or an if else? That's an if else because it's got 2 parts, right? An if Just has one wing and then the other one goes straight down. That's an if. We know what a less than and greater than signs are. Okay, so and or not. If you had to do this, A is equal to true, B is equal to false, C is equal to true. Nah, let's do it more like we had in our Boolean algebra quiz. What is this expression? A and B. Wait, A is equal to 100 and B is equal to 100. Is that true or false?
False.
It's false because B is not equal to 200 and that was an and. How about A is equal to 100 or B is equal to 100? That one's true because one and only one has to be true. I mean, if they both are, that's great. How about if A equals 100 or B is equal to 200 and C is equal to 300? Is that true or false? Well, how do we figure it out? Which one has to be done first, the and or the or? And has to be done first. Because it's like logical multiplication. So you would just check. Is B equal to 200 and C is equal to 300? It sure is. So since that's true, we know it's true even without looking at this. So even if this had been wrong, like that, then this is true. Now, I didn't arrange this carefully enough so that, you know, if you had done it the wrong way, then you would have gotten the wrong answer. I'm not being clever enough to go, okay, well, if you looked at it the wrong way, but just make sure that you know ands have to be done first. If I give you a truth table that looks like this, you're going to need to know whether it's and, whether it's true or false. If it looks like this, true, or false, 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 true, false, true, false, false, true, true, true. Does that look like an and or an or? Is this x and y, or is this x or y? What's the only result that's true? The only one that's true is when they're both true. Does that sound more like an and or an or? So this is an and truth table. So we add this, x, y, and result. Obviously you're going to know right because it's going to be the other one. But here's what it looks like. Alright guys, I hope those of y'all who are talking in the back of the class know this stuff so that you can ace the exam. Also, you may be distracting the people around you. So, if we can, I know that we're not working together on code because we haven't been typing code, so please. Alrighty. And I feel like a jerk having to say that, so please. Last class. Okay, so here we go. This is an or. How do you know? Because only one side or the other had to be true. Just know the difference between the and the or truth tables. That's about enough out of chapter 4. You're going to want to review your mind tabs, but check chapter 5. Looping. We've done a lot of looping. We know what a flowchart for a loop looks like. We know what our loop control variable is, right? If we have something that says while I less than 10, I is our loop control variable. So every while loop you write is going to have 3 steps. It's going to have an initialization, it's going to have a test, and it's going to have an update. And I know those are not exactly what this calls them. Provide a starting value, test the loop control, and alter. Okay, so the initialization is providing a start value. The test is, what do we call it? Test. And then the update is alter the loop control variable. So write a while loop that will count from 1 to 10. So we can't use forward, we can't use a range. What are our 3 steps? What do we have to do? Yeah, we need to initialize a loop control variable. I don't care what variable you use. I is equal to, and what am I going to do? I want to start it at 1. Now what's our test going to look like? And there's more than one correct answer. While I is this a good one or a bad one? Less than 10. Is that actually going to get up to 10?
No.
No, so that's not a good one. So you would either need to do while less than 11, which makes it kind of like a range statement, or you could do while I is less than or equal to 10. Then you could print out I, and you could update it via whatever way you like. Plus equals 1, I is equal to I plus 1, whatever. Okay, and yeah, I left off my colon. Nested loop is a loop inside of a loop. All right. So we know for loops. We've been talking about them an awful lot. Certainly not going to ask any questions about post-test loops because this language doesn't even have them. They're called do loops. Alrighty. Next. We have talked an awful lot about arrays, so I don't feel like we even need to go through the PowerPoint. Yeah. I mean, review it, look at your exam again, but we've been using them so much that I hope you've got it by now. Like there, we've declared an array of months. Now in our language, we'd have to put square braces around it, and we'd leave off that word string. But that would be an array of months. What's the key difference between an array and a list? Which one is fixed in length? One of them is fixed in length, one of them you can append to. Yeah, lists you can append to, arrays are fixed in length. We've been using append all the time. That's because Python only supports lists. It doesn't have a separate data type for arrays. So I just want you to keep that in your head as you go to the next class. A linear search is when you start at the beginning and you keep going all the way to the end to find your item. All right, that's about enough. If you haven't taken a Chapter 7 Mind Tap, you really, really ought to, right? And then go ahead and review them all. Remember, you can keep taking them until you get 100s. I think the limits are set to none. You can take it as many times as you want. And if you find one that's locked and you wish you could take it, text me and let me know. All right, guys. If any of y'all show up on Thursday, I'll be real glad to see y'all. Otherwise, I will see y'all next Thursday. Are there any questions? Make a Dropbox.
Is this like the midterm we can use our
That's correct. It's open book, open mind tap, open notes, open PowerPoint, open raise your hand. Yep. All right, the other class